going to kind of touch on a few things, and then kind of more stuff can come out of the discussion. And so obviously the context of this is that we've just had the COP26 conference, which was in Glasgow. That, you know, a couple of us, me and Angela on this call, were in Glasgow for that. Not taking part in the delegation, but in the movement around it. And I think it's kind of widely recognised on the kind of environmental left, at least, that those negotiations failed, at least according, you know, against any kind of, you know, reasonable level of ambition for what is needed to kind of tackle the climate crisis. But I guess, you know, that was predicted beforehand, because those negotiations failed because of the, you know, that wasn't unexpected. Like, looking at the trajectory, it was clear that they weren't gonna, you know, bring amazing results, and I think that is down to kind of systemic features of capitalism, and kind of, which at the very best has, you know, very powerful systemic forces cutting against serious climate action. So we can talk more about that if people want, but I'm going to talk more about the kind of movement side. So, like, lots on the environmental left was saying, you know, in the run-up to the conference, that you know, we expect this to fail, but what is important is that we're building a movement around it. Now, I guess I'd argue that you know, the movement, that there were kind of some positive things in the movement, but that, you know, overall that movement failed against the kind of level of ambition of a movement that we want and need to confront this problem. I'm mostly going to touch on the UK, although obviously it's kind of an international issue, and maybe some of those things can be brought in here. So, you know, I don't think it failed because, you know, you could say, you know, the movement failed because if the movement had been successful, it would have forced the delegates and the conference to make the decisions and changes needed. That kind of isn't the argument I'm making, because I think whilst we do need to criticise the official UNFCCC process, the official COP process, for its kind of shortfalls, the answer to the climate crisis internationally isn't one of just kind of beefed up negotiations between kind of existing capitalist governments. It needs to be kind of a lot deeper than that. So fundamentally, I think that, you know, the main organisation, the main kind of face of a lot of the movements around COP26 was the so-called COP26 coalition, which very much, as the title of this talk said, you know, and as the title of the coalition says, it was very much a coalition, and it remains so. It very much felt like, you know, being in Glasgow, like we had brought together the various disparate parts of kind of different environmental and other, like, social justice and other movements in one place, but they were kind of operating alongside each other, not working together. So, you know, to give some examples, and we can talk more about this, you know, we had kind of like religious organizations, like Stalinist organizations and anarchists, all, you know, alongside each other, hosting talks and so on. We had people who were talking about the need to transform society, you know, system change, not climate change, or maybe more radical things like we were saying, alongside people who were, you know, focusing on how to make the COP26 process actually work, or others who talked about kind of daily acts of, you know, environmental things, you know, how to be sustainable in itself, or you had you know, people talking about like no false solutions in the sense of like carbon drawdown, and others that were kind of, you know, advocating that. But you had these different perspectives, so it was kind of relatively open. Sorry. it was like relatively open, but these different perspectives were not put into kind of dialogue with each other for the most part. They were kind of, talking with their own audiences alongside each other. Even people who kind of tended to agree for the most part were not in dialogue. They were just, in the same city, under the ban of the same People's Summit or the like, but kind of not cohering together. Additionally to that, there's kind of some more criticisms we might make. So the COP26 coalition itself was not transparent as to kind of how decisions were made, and the lack of transparency in that democracy also extended to it wasn't clear how, if at all, grassroots activists could feed into the central, like, national and international kind of organization of the coalition. So, on a local level, there was, in a lot of places, there was a reasonable amount of kind of democracy, but there was kind of democracy in implementing an agreed strategy that was kind of already decided at a national level. And I guess beyond that, the politics of many participants in the movement, whether at the kind of protests, so I guess just kind of dialing back a stage, just kind of what did the movement around COP26 look like? We had, stuff organised by the COP26 coalition comprised for the most part of a series of very large protests on the kind of middle Saturday of the negotiations, and then 4 days of different workshops and discussions. Like, around that, there were a series of other kind of protests and other discussions organised by other people, and not related to, not under the ban of the COP26 coalition, but I guess that in many ways that was kind of, at least from within the UK, that seemed like the kind of centre of the movement. There was also youth climate strike activity on the Friday, which was somewhat linked to that. But within that movement and within the different discussions around that movement, for the most part, there was a failure to recognise, there was a general recognition that on a significant section of the environmental left and environmentalists there, that capitalism is the driving force of environmental destruction, that capitalism has a intrinsic drive for profit and for ever greater profit, that means that it can't respect any boundaries, any limits to its ever greater drive for profit, and on the scale of a nation state, and a kind of ever greater drive for growth and for creating a welcome environment for international capital. And that means that various different boundaries, whether like workers' rights and public health, but also crucially in this case environmental boundaries, aren't respected. So that some kind of critique of capital and of capitalism was reasonably widespread within the movement. But the next logical step for us in Workers' Liberty is the place where capital is recreated, where profit is created, is in the workplace by workers, that's then expropriated by the capitalists. And so the workplace is a crucial site for the recreation of society as a whole, of capitalism and of profit. And as a result, it's of kind of strategic key importance. And so class struggle, environmentalism, and organising at a rank and file level within the workplace is the kind of key strategy that is needed to tackle climate change. So that next step, the step from recognising capitalism as the problem to recognising workers' action as the solution, was largely missing. Even the kind of trade union hub didn't take, for the most part, from what I saw, there was a kind of lack of a serious approach to class struggle environmentalism and to kind of rank and file class struggle. So that's kind of, so far I've kind of outlined the some of the problems with the movement, in recent times, as I've seen it. We could talk about kind of XR and the youth climate strikes, and I will touch on that kind of going forwards, but maybe more people want to talk more about that in the discussion. But what is the answer? This talk isn't just about what is the problem with it kind of so far, but kind of how do we go forwards and build a movement. So my central argument is that there is no there's no magic bullet. There's no simple single solution to building the kind of environmental movement that we need. So I've critiqued in this talk and in various other places the COP26 coalition for not being democratic. We need to have those arguments. It would be better if it was, but if we did win a kind of a COP26 coalition that was democratic and was on a better political basis, that would be good and valuable. But that wouldn't, that in itself wouldn't provide the solution as a whole. So I think fundamentally my argument is that we need to build the various disparate forces that currently exist. We need to build from them to build a grassroots, rank and file socialist and environmentalist class struggle movement centered on the workplace. So I'm going to kind of touch on various aspects of what I think is the way that we can move forwards with that. So crucially, as I said, the workplace is central to that. So this means like organizing at work around organizing at work where the power is, which can radically transform society, which can force the change to change things within the workplace and beyond. So in particular, we're talking about environmental questions. There's a lot of opportunity in many workplaces to organize the work around environmental issues. So there are the kind of big and kind of celebrated or should be more celebrated examples. So a recent one has been a GKN drivelines factory in Birmingham, which is a factory that creates car parts, like parts for cars, and is a factory that kind of creates that kind of thing. And they've been threatened with like large scale redundancies, and the union and workers there organized to put forwards not just kind of put forwards an alternative to the redundancies and to fight against the redundancies, but to put forwards an alternative which involves transforming their what they create from currently fossil fuel powered cars to kind of to greener alternatives to electric cars. So that's crucial, because those are the kind of changes that we need. But it's also crucial in building workplace power, which is a necessary step towards the wider transformation of society and winning the environmental program. Now, ultimately, so far in GKN, the union leadership sold out the workers and they kind of called off their strike so far. We need to kind of see how that develops and intervene to support it where we can. Obviously, a lot of people are in workplaces where there's not so immediate and straightforward and a kind of environmental transition, but for example, if you work in a school, there's like a lot of workers do, a lot of workers liberty activists do. There are still environmental issues that you could organise around at work. So one of the recent protest movements that we might have some criticisms of, but that is inspiring in many ways in the UK, at least has been, in the UK has been Insulate Britain, which has been fighting for widespread insulation and mostly focusing on homes across the UK. Now, a lot of workplaces are not adequately insulated, and there's kind of high environmental costs to heating and all of that. Now, these are things which cost the kind of the people who operate and run the school, for example, or local government building or university or whatever your workplace is to implement. But it's something that workers can organise around to fight and to try and win. There are other examples. Maybe people want to talk about that particular workplaces in the discussion. And beyond that, there's a possibility for wider environmental action in the workplace. So action in the workplace that isn't directed just at your employer or just at transforming things in your workplace. So the main examples I'm thinking of is when there were when youth climate strikes were a larger and more regular phenomena in the UK. Some of our comrades organised actions in their work to kind of in solidarity and on the days of these youth strikes. So a particular striking and kind of model example, I think, is in Lambeth local government unison. Some workers' liberty activists and others that we're working alongside organised to take a delegation of workers down to the climate strikes. They got quite a lot of people down on that day, when they would have been in work, and that's kind of valuable in itself, but it's also valuable in the organisation around that has kind of spurred and led to ongoing organisation around environmental issues within the remit of their unison branch, and that's also kind of fed into wider class struggle. So like a lot of many of the new reps that they've had within the Lambeth unison bunch since then have been people who've come in via the environmental movement, people for whom the trade union movement isn't necessarily their kind of default go-to place to be organising, but they care about the environment and they've seen it in there, and that kind of helping to build that bread and butter workplace power is also crucial to building a movement that can genuinely change on these things. So beyond those immediate workplace levels, beyond that immediate workplace organising, there's a need to organise within the labour movement to raise ideas and raise a programme of demands to bring the changes we need. We don't think the environmental transition can't be won just through this or that. Workplace transforming is as important as that is, and so we also must fight for, within unions and within the Labour Party, programmes of sets of demands and visions of the environmental transition we need. And Workers' Liberty has done that in previous years in Labour Party conference 2019, to some extent 2020. Maybe Roxana wants to talk about kind of what's going on in the GMB at the moment. So I think that's really crucial for kind of expanding the overall horizons. On the other side, so I've talked mostly about kind of environmental activism within the labour movement. On the other side, it's really crucial to engage with the environmental movement, which for a couple of reasons. So there are a lot of people, as we've seen recently, there are a lot of people and a lot of energy and quite inspiring energy and creativity and drive from people in the environmental movement to take action on climate change. Now, as environmental socialists, we think that the labour movement will be a force to make that change, but we want to bring those people and that energy from the environmental movement into the labour movement to help bring about that change, and kind of it can also, as well as kind of bringing people into that struggle, like as the example I gave with youth strikes, but also the case with COP26 coalition, and also to some extent XR, the kind of like events and organization organized by environmental activists, not directly within the workplace, can provide an arena, can provide a kind of context in which workplace environmental action can take. So, okay, I've actually gone on kind of longer than I was intending, but yeah, so I guess part of, I think, some of the limitations of the movement around COP26 means that it currently, looking around the environmental movement in the UK, like there's no kind of clear place where you say, okay, this is where the kind of next environmental movement is going to be rebuilt. But there are some clear places where we need to, where socialist activists should get involved and try and organize it around kind of class struggle, environmental angles. So in a lot of places, XR is still organizing, and people might have seen in the kind of over the last week or so, in a lot of places, XR activists took action against Amazon, the kind of company, for its environmentally destructive practices. Now, that campaigning and activism is something that socialist environmentalists should get involved with and support, but we also have a particular angle to bring to that, which is the importance of engaging with like Amazon workers. And obviously there've been, like, particularly in the US, but also elsewhere, there've been kind of fairly high profile class struggle disputes within Amazon recently. So trying to link the two of them, is one avenue. Following up from the kind of COP26 protests, there've been like a lot of coalition hubs. So there's, Bristol COP26 coalition hub that was building around the protests and People's Summit whilst COP26 was on around a month ago. After COP26 is finished, a lot of the hubs are kind of continuing and going to reinvent themselves. There was a meeting a few days ago in Bristol about the next steps. There will be in other places, so it's, activists should check that out and see what's going on. And there's a kind of potential for, like, in many ways, the COP26 coalition has more organic roots with the trade union movement than Extinction Rebellion does, for example. And finally, hopefully, youth climate strikes will kind of continue and restart a bit more. I'm concerned that might not happen as much as we might like, but like there are many examples of kind of how to bring a working class orientation to that. So finally, I guess within all of these fights within the workplace, within the union, within the environmental movement, within the Labour Party, we're fighting to raise class struggle environmentalism, but more broadly, the job of like bringing revolutionary socialist ideas, revolutionary socialist environmentalism to all of these different struggles is something that we can do additionally to the kind of concrete organizing within them. So everything from meetings such as this, that we can bring and advertise, to different environmental publications that Workers' Liberty and others can create. We brought out a new one, and then another new edition of that very recently. And I think with all of these, with all of these somewhat disparate seeming activity, we can plant the seeds and start the process of rebuilding from the ground up the potential forces which can, go towards cohering a movement that can be the kind of force that we need to radically transform society and force really meaningful environmental changes as needed. So yeah, I'm going to end there. Thank you.